Dan Morgan, general manager of your Carolina Panthers, met the media today. Said a lot. He played the hits, according to my friend Darin Gantt, Panthers.com. He didn't sing My Way by Sinatra, though, did he?
No, he did not. I got to tell you, Dan Morgan's old coach, John Fox, would have been proud of that exhibition because he stood there for 20 minutes and didn't say a thing. And that's really hard to do. Dan Morgan is a plain-spoken person. So Dan, I've always said throughout this offseason, when Dan tells you something, you'd probably be wise to believe it. And so standing around and BSing and prevaricating and stalling isn't really his bag, but he hit him straight today. He was all over it.
So I do think he said something, so I'll lead with that. At least he said something that raised my antennas.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to hearing this because I got to write off that press conference in a little bit, and frankly, I'll take any suggestions you've got.
Okay. Now I didn't hear the tone and we didn't hear the clip, but when he was asked about a fifth-year option for Ickey Ekwonu, and he basically said, "Yeah, we're basically taking a wait and see on that." To me, I'm wondering, are they 100% sold on him as the franchise left tackle of the future?
Oh, I think so. And it goes back to a couple of things. I mean, the other thing, you got to go back to the combine when Dan was asked about Ickey, and he's like, yeah, we want to extend him. They want to keep Ickey around here. And I asked Canales specifically about that at the owners meeting a couple of weeks ago. And he was like, we think we got our left tackle. We think, Ickey is that guy for the next little bit. I mean, the thing about Ickey is he's still, 25 years old. He came here very young, and it's still that's part of the reason I think this project appeals to Dave Canales and Dan Morgan so much is so many of the key people are still 25 and under. And right. I think him being one of those guys, and maybe he's 26. I don't remember when his birthday is. I'm negligent about sending cards for stuff like that. But the fact is, still very young in this game and still getting better at it. So I think they're comfortable with Ickey going on. And, I tend to look at this draft as, not getting too hung up on immediate needs and what they've got to have for 2025. Because this thing is all about who's going to be on this team when it's good and contending for the playoffs. And that may not even be this year. That may be next year. And it's not that they're, trying to not win. Obviously they want to be competitive, but I think there's a vision of this thing. If you look at the way they've shopped through the offseason, who they've drafted last year and this year, they're thinking 2 years, 3 years down the line with this deal. Darin
Gantt, Panthers.com, at Darin Gantt, 2 T's on Twitter. He also talked about, he said a bunch of things, but he's also said that he's willing to trade back. How much more does that become a possibility now that everybody knows that the Saints are likely going to be at least considering a quarterback at number 9? Right.
Here's one thing I promise you I will not do. I will never pretend to assume that I know what the Saints are about to do. That's like being John Malkovich. I'm not sure I want to walk around inside that head for too long because they do things sometimes it's like, oh, well, that was a choice. But, I think there's an assumption. There's some natural dot connecting going on. Oh, you don't have a quarterback? You might be interested in acquiring one. Honestly, if the Saints went out and drafted somebody else or Jackson Dart or – whatever it happens to be, that wouldn't surprise me either because nothing the Saints do surprises me. They have been unconventional at times in the past, and that includes the decision to sign Derek Carr to a bunch of money a couple of years ago. So the Carolina Panthers were in that market too. Frank Reich was thinking seriously about rather than committing resources to the number 1 pick, just signing Derek Carr as a free agent and rolling with that. So that would have been an extension of the Teddy Sam Baker project where you take the veteran of the year and just see what you can do with that. they wanted to go in a different direction. They did, and I think it'd be hard to argue that they're not better off for it right now.
Oh no, there's no question. It looks to me that the Bryce Young gamble, because it was a gamble when you trade up from 9-1, it looks to me like the gamble is paid off. I mean, I don't really want to go back and litigate why I still think they shouldn't have done it, but I do think the gamble is paid off. Look, I know it's, we really haven't gotten into any off-season programs, but has Bryce been seen around the facility? Talk to me a little bit about where the team is with the offense and Bryce. And I know he said specifically today he likes his receiver room.
Yeah, and I would refer you back to Panthers.com for all the latest from Dave Canales from the owners' meetings a couple weeks ago, where we talked about that at length, Adam. No, they do, and that's another one of those areas where the young kids are a big part of this thing. I think getting Adam Thielen to come back for another year was big because it allows Xavier, Legette, Jalen Coker to continue to learn and develop. I mean, I anticipate, I don't know that I necessarily think it's going to be at 8, but I anticipate coming out of next weekend with a new wide receiver to talk to.
Yep.
Somewhere in the second, third, fourth round probably, makes sense to add another young body to a young room. So I think they're going to continue to go that direction. This is still, Dave said down in Florida the other week, this is still a running team. This is still about the offensive line, about Chuba Hubbard, about Rico Dowdle, and all that allows Bryce to be able to do off of that. So look at where their resources are. No team in the NFL's got more money sunk in offensive linemen than the Carolina Panthers, and I think that's on purpose. There was a problem to fix last year, and they fixed it. That cost money, and they don't care. But you've got a first-round pick and a couple of second-round picks and 2 high-end free agents filling out that line at the moment. So that's the way they want it to look.
Darin Gantt, Panthers.com, is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. They obviously did very well without necessarily huge splashes for star players, but they did well in free agency to address some areas of need. When you look at the depth chart right now, what is an area that you think is important for them to address coming up Bryce Young days from now?
Well, I think there's a couple of, or also Ryan Santoso days from now. If you wanna,
I don't remember that guy, so he does look like somebody that it would be fun to maybe share a corner stool with.
Yeah, we're also Matt Lytle days away from the draft, and also Rodney Peete days away from the draft.
That would be better.
And Graham Gano and Stephon Gilmore. No, I think, again, source, my 2 eyes, this team's still short on defensive playmakers. They need corners, they need safeties, they need outside linebackers. There's only 3 safeties on the roster, and you generally go to training camp with 8 of them. So I would anticipate they're going to add safeties over the next couple of weeks. They got to add pass rushers, and to me, that's, people talk about the strength of this draft being in pass rushers, being in defensive front 7 guys. Well, congratulations. That's where the biggest needs are here. It wouldn't, if they took 2 of those guys, if they took one in the first round, one in the third, or one in the first, one in the second, and went Gettleman on it, that wouldn't surprise me, because if you've got premium picks, pass rushers are one of those things that when you got an opportunity to get one, you should. So I think that's still the big one. I mean, safety's an area that you can address later on. That's not a position that demands a top 10 pick. If you've got a top 10 pick and they're pass rushers, it makes a lot of sense to me to take them.
I agree. Where are you on potentially adding a tight end?
Fine. I mean, they did bring back Tommy Tremble, who, I don't think it's a priority. I mean, I know, and I wrote a quick post on the website this morning about Tyler Warren, and everybody loves that he's super productive and got that John Riggins mentality that he ascribed to his father buying him a jersey when he was a kid. I mean, I just think that that's not – you can find people to contribute for what they need at tight end. I just go back to Dave Canales' offenses over the years have usually had one guy catching 30 or 40 balls and then 4 guys catching 2 to 7 each. I I mean, that's just usually the way it's been built. Now they got J.T. Sanders. They got Tommy Tremble coming back. And Tommy really, over the last 6 games, the strides he made are probably as significant as the ones Bryce made. The one we'll always remember is the turnaround no-look pass in Atlanta when Bryce is throwing up the touchdown sign. But, Tommy really played better over the second half. I mean, it's a need. Could they use one of those guys for 26, 27, 28? Yeah, maybe, sure. But it's not as much of a priority as finding people to chase quarterbacks and put them on their back.
Darin Gantt, Panthers.com, is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. So you spent time with Dave Canales. You certainly wrote enough about what Dave had to say about the offense. How did Dave grow during the course of the season?
I think a lot of it is natural. I mean, most coaches will tell you you learn about all the things that aren't football. That when somebody's mom gets sick and goes in the hospital and they want to miss practice, or family member dies, or somebody has a baby, those unexpected hurdles that complicate your well-scripted football plan, learning how to deal with that kind of stuff and the human beings involved with them is as significant as learning X's and O's. I mean, he is very, Canales will tell you up front, he is stealing all this from Pete Carroll. He is running the same plays Pete ran for years. He's got the same kind of energy, that same kind of attitude about this thing every day. And I think really learning how to manage the people that are associated with all this stuff is a big component of what he's doing. And you could see him growing into it. I mean, when you haven't done a thing before, if you're too confident, you're probably faking it. Right. And there was a lot of stuff Dave Canales was experiencing for the first time last year, whether it was when to throw the challenge flag or not, or how do I handle, changing a schedule when players complain about this thing or that thing, how far to go in accommodating guys. So I think he did a good job of seeing some of that stuff for the first time so that he can then develop a plan for it. Maybe it's the old Eagle Scout in me, but the preparation, the planning is still one of my cheat codes. If you start talking about that, I'm inclined to like you and what you're doing. And he's super into it. I mean, it's just having a plan for all this stuff every day that he wants to do and really developing guys. I was talking to him earlier this offseason about Xavier Legette, and he talked about specific things he wanted XL to do this year, and then the specific things he wanted him to do next year in year 3. And, I mean, he's thinking about this thing multiple years down the line. So I think getting that experience and seeing what it's like for the first time allows him to put some of those abstract concepts that are in his head into concrete practice.
I'm going to ask you one more thing. We only have about a minute left, but I will say this about Dave Canales. He doesn't get nearly the steps in that Pete Carroll did over the course of a game.
He gets a lot.
No, not like Pete Carroll. Carroll gets the full allotted number of steps in. Who fills the leadership void of Shaq Thompson?
J.C. Horn is probably the most likely candidate for that. J.C.'s already moved into Shaq's old locker.
Okay.
And that is kind of the first tangible sign of here's who we want you to be. But I would also refer you back to Panthers.com when we talked to J.C. when he signed his extension. I mean, and he talked a lot about Shaq and how much it meant. Shaq took great care with J.C. early on to put him in situations where he was uncomfortable talking to grown men because he knew this day was inevitably going to come. And he knew J.C. was going to be a part of this thing longer than he was going to be. So I think there are so many steps along the way of people deliberately putting J.C. Horn into those positions, and he's the most likely one. He's never going to be quite the talker Shaq is, but few are. But I just think J.C. and Derrick are the guys. Derrick Brown are the guys who will lead this thing. And they're different types of cats in the same way Pete Carroll and Dave Canales are a little bit different personality-wise, but they're still running the same place, still doing the same stuff. By the way, the most adorable thing about Pete Carroll talking about Dave at the owners' meeting the other week, he calls him David.
David.
And I find that endearing. I just love that. I mean, when you care about somebody and you'll talk about him that way, I love that.
Darin Gantt. I assume Darin is your full given name, right?
Yeah, it's not short for anything. I wish I had something clever to say here, but I don't. I'm fresh out.
Nor do I. Darin Gantt, at Darin Gantt on Twitter. 2 T's for excess talent, sir. I appreciate your time always. Talk to you soon.
Absolutely love it. See y'all.
You got it.